Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, says there will be an economic disaster if the proposed E-levy fails to go through. There is intense, aggressive opposition for it. The minority will not want to hear anything about it, even after a concession from one point to survive as Parliament reconvenes. As you may know, UTAG, the University Teachers Association of Ghana, has been on strike for a while now, just at the time that universities have resumed. What it means is that in the last couple of weeks, since the universities resumed, the students have been loitering on the campuses, having practically nothing to do. It ordered the teachers to get back into the lecture theaters, has been to the court to stop the strike. You must have heard some of them say, "We are ready if the courts will jail all of us," because they do not understand why in this they not take home more than 5,000 Ghana cedis a month. Yes, you heard right. The basic salary is around 4,000 something. So, will the universities be shut down? One after the other. What are the threats to the neighbors? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. Welcome back. And here is something stake. The Auditor General report for 2016 to 2020 revealed that there's been theft of a whopping 12.8 billion Ghana cedis. Yes, theft ought to remain the appropriate word, not irregularities, blah, blah. Who are answering for this naked 6 billion Ghana cedis? The SOEs, state-owned enterprises, posted a loss of almost 6 million cedis in 2019. In 2020, they have made a loss of 5.3 billion Ghana cedis. It must be troubling that these said to be better paid than the president continue to post losses, and still these mismanagers keep their jobs. The fact is that some are square pegs in round holes who get the job only by reason of holding membership cards of the governing party. We are told that the value of Ghana's 27% of our GDP for 2020. It must be troubling that these entities that have the capacity to contribute 11 billion to the national coffers are so mismanaged that they only make losses. In 2019, it was reported that 47 of them have never submitted the basic but important and legally mandated annual financial statements for 5, despite superintending the impunity in violating the Public Financial Management Act. In 2019, only 14 out of the 126 SOEs met this mandatory legal requirement of submitting annual statements. So, why do we feign surprise when the latest end the fight? As the Ghana Integrity Initiative invites crusaders to a meeting on Monday to re-strategize, I invite you to listen to this and play your part before it is too late. I'm just having a little technical hitch, but there is a quick statement by a renowned corruption fighter who tells and educates all of us on how to effectively win the fight against corruption. And I really wanted to share that with you, but having some technical challenges. We'll continue, and I'll share that with you next week. What we all need to watch and be very careful about also is that most of these people that the Auditor General accounts report shows they have been involved in this theft are not exactly politicians. They are in the ministries, departments, and agencies. We must who are also engaged in the grand corruption. We must fight the tyranny of the party people and foot soldiers who come up to defend the naked theft. And when people are put on trial, they come and shout that it is political, impoverish all the time. It can't continue that way. Yes? And as revealed how this is widespread, including in the courts. But it is not the case that all politicians, all civil servants, or judges, some of them unnecessarily. The most important thing to do is to fish out those that have been caught stealing and punish them accordingly. If we don't do that, Ghana will continue to fail the test, as we have done once again. You can't be proud. Now, let's get to look at the issues that we are going to discuss this morning. We are going to look at the E-levy, and the finance minister says if it doesn't pass, we will get into serious financial from the E-levy. This country will not work. We are afraid we don't want to go to the IMF. Well, we'll discuss that and why professors, why PhDs, spending close to how many years of education and training the brains and the minds needed for this country will earn a pittance and will not be allowed to agitate, wave within Africa. 5 coups within how many years? How do we avoid the threats? This show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, DBS Industries. We are truly your roof experts. CBG, we stand with you. Fabrimental, your partner in steel. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. The Barstow School. Start here, go everywhere.
No current country is insulated from its occurrence in the community, and we have to take action to nip it in the bud. We're confronted with a setback to our democracy, taking cognizance of the twin coup d'etat in Mali on 18th August 2020 and 24th May 2021, the one in Guinea on 5th September 2021, and now on 24th January 2022 in Burkina Faso. Added to this is the complex security environment occasioned by terrorist attacks and pandemics, presenting for us a toxicity. Conformity with our ECOWAS Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, adopted in 2001. The principles of constitutional conversion principles provide for the following. A. Any accession to power must be through free, fair, and transparent elections. B. Unconstitutional change is prohibited, as well as power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. And D. The armed forces must be apolitical and must be under the command of a legally constituted political authority. No serving member of the armed forces may seek to run for elective political office. Excellencies, the happenings in the region tell us that not everybody has accepted democracy as the preferred mode of governance. We still have some work to do to convince such people that we are all safer under democracies. The resurgence of coup d'etat represents a threat to peace, security, and stability in West Africa. This situation hinders the much-needed economic and social development of the region. I've convened this meeting with the hope to address the urgent situation in Burkina Faso and find solutions that will restore constitutional order to Burkina Faso in our collective duties and obligations to ensure a peaceful, democratic, just, stable, and prosperous community. I urge you to examine critically this rising phenomenon in our region so that we take the necessary decisions that meet the aspirations and expectations of our peoples. The rest of the world is looking up to us to be firm in this matter and await the outcome of our meeting.
Right, so you just Fuado, who is the chairperson of the ECOWAS. Now, he called a meeting of his colleagues across the region, and they took a number of decisions. They are very unhappy about the coups that have happened. Mali on the 18th of August 2020, Guinea on the 5th of September, and 6 coups, including failed attempts within a very short time. Well, they have strongly condemned what happened, and they are demanding the immediate release and protection of the president, Christian Kabore, and they have suspended Burkina Faso from all ECOWAS institutions. They are seeking immediate restoration of constitutional order and have instructed chiefs of defense staff to deploy a delegation to Burkina Faso. They have also asked for a number of things to be done, including a meeting they will hold in February to re-examine the situation in Burkina, Guinea, and Mali. Let's get on Zoom and speak to our guests. Let's find out if anybody is listening at all. All the time, it doesn't change anything. My guest, Professor Kwejo Appiagyei Etua, is Associate Professor of Law at the University of Ghana with an eye on matters regarding the sub-region and ECO and the AU. Colonel Festus Abuaje is author and consultant, a former army person himself, and Professor Kwesi Eni, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Great. I think that, Colonel, will have to unmute, and then Professor Echietu will have to unmute because I didn't hear you.
I didn't say.
Great. I can hear you both now. And we want to especially thank all of you so much for dedicating your time to research and studying to assist our viewers and the whole nation and the millions of people who listen to us across the globe all the time, particularly for last year. Thank you so very much. Now, let's start members that the president convened yesterday. Is anybody listening to them, you think?
Well, that's a good question. I think that, as you rightly said, there has been a particular format that they just pull out from the cabinet and then read it anytime there's a coup d'etat. And that is to say, we condemn the coup d'etat and there should be a return to constitutional rule. But the point is that process and that approach has not worked. And so I don't know why they keep coup d'etat, including unsuccessful ones. And so the point is that something needs to be done, and done now, to promote peace and security, especially in the West Africa sub-region. When the president spoke, he talked about unconstitutional means of attaining power. But that approach needs to be re-examined in two ways. One is that there can be situations where unconstitutional changes in government or undemocratic means, democratic governance in the countries. When the democratic governance process is not in place, it is what triggers the coup d'etat that we are talking about. And so I'm not sure if we should continue to listen to ECOWAS and don't see any progress on the ground. That is a big problem that we have to face.
In one of the reports I've been reading, as in news reports I've been reading, there's a particular paragraph. It says that January 24 this week, reached the Africa Cup of Nations quarterfinals in Cameroon. The 64-year-old Kabore was deposed by mutinous soldiers. Like the soccer match, the coup was welcomed on the streets of Ouagadougou, the capital city. We have seen. So this is what is happening. What must be accounting for this? It's becoming attractive to go back to the era of coup d'etats.
Yes, that is the case. I remember writing my PhD dissertation in the late 90s and making the point that the democratic arrangement that was being foisted on African countries by the West is fraught with danger. And we are going to face challenges returning to democratic rule in Africa. And that is what is panning out now. Because when you are talking about the democracy, one is led by social forces, the other is controlled by governments. The social forces one, remember successfully how it took place in Benin, for example, where the government was stripped of its powers, the ruling party was dissolved, a transitional arrangement was set up, including all the necessary social civil society activists, and the new constitution was drawn, elections were held, sponsored ones that took place, our own case in Ghana and other countries. And that didn't lay the proper framework for democracy to thrive. Secondly, democracy that is imported cannot meet the particular cultural circumstances of the people for it to thrive. And so governments have taken advantage of the weaknesses in the structure and are therefore making the people to suffer in a lot of ways. Laws have been made, but the laws are not working, human rights affected. So the democratic system is not working. We are moving from liberal democracies to illiberal democracies. Third termism is on the rise, where governments are changing their constitutions to remain permanently in office or setting up dynasties and so on. So the people will ultimately is likely to continue if ECOWAS, AU, does these two main bodies that we have do not change the strategy in terms of how we recognize governments, and in terms of how we ensure that we bring out the relationship between respect for human security and how that leads to violations of human rights and ultimately leads to the military for coming to power, but not following the rules that have been laid down for them to follow. So that is the problem we are facing now.
Interesting. Now, I'll return to you, particularly with your understanding of the laws around or the conventions. And I believe, if I recall, you were so certain that this was not going to be the end of it. Presenting, please unmute your mic. Again?
Between now and June 2023, we will see similar things happen. Probably 2 more. If we don't stem the tide between now and 2023, and we get 2 more, the pack of cards will begin to fall. This is because the toxicity challenge that all countries in the Sahel and West Africa are facing, and other African countries. But for the sake of the conversation, let me focus on the Sahel and West Africa. He mentioned pandemics and violent extremism. The pandemics we couldn't have predicted in 2009. But compounding that is the excessive corruption, is the youth bulge, the inability to create jobs, the educational systems that do not respond to nor train people to meet or work in a digital age are present everywhere else. But something just for the sake of the argument and for history, you know, in December 1980 in Ghana, the government then refused the Black Stars to go to Libya to play the African Cup of Nations. New PNDC regime then said the Black Stars could go. So there's a way in which history repeats itself. But we are all very fantastic history teachers, but we are very poor history students. Okay, so what has happened in Guinea, Mali, and you did random sampling, and 9 out of 10 said they are not surprised. The real question becomes, what is the quality of intelligence and risk assessment analysis that is presented to our leaders to be able to take preventive action? I mean, somebody must be answering to the president, because whilst we were focusing on Mali and providing all the list of do's and don'ts, and as just speak to people's aspirations, the bulk of the youth in our populations don't know about these principles and these norms. So what is failing West Africa and the Sahel? It's not the military's penchant for power. Unfortunately, it is democracy and the way in which we've run it and implemented it has failed to materialize. And that is why suddenly this monstrosity called military rule is becoming appealing to ordinary people in Africa. But we need to pull back from the brink. And pulling back from that brink, as Kudo says, is that does not allow the opposition to have access to the media, manipulate their armed forces or uniformed forces to play particular roles that is inimical to democratic growth. So I think we need to expand that physiology and to ensure that things are done differently. Finally, is the coups are taking place now within a changed and a changing geopolitical framework. France has exploited its former territories so disastrously that people just don't want France. We now see an old player that is resurgent now, the new Russia, willing and capable of using different instruments, we can discuss the appropriateness of those instruments of security. And it is that geopolitical shift added to the increasing populations in our sub-region that we need to focus on. They are the two new variables that make
all right. Can Professor Sabuaji, reading for this program, talk about insecurity that is rampant, poor governance, and central frustrations of the youth, unemployment. The ECOWAS leaders and the AU leaders stepping in to disturb the democratic order. And so they continue to denounce that. Is that the approach? Is that the solution?
Well, first of all, let me associate myself with the broad points outlined by the two professors. There is a certain degree of disconnect between the ruling class or political class and the realities within the socio-economic security dynamics. But permit me to take two of the items mentioned by the president. The question of the military being apolitical and the so-called zero tolerance for unconstitutional changes, i.e., when power is transferred in any way other than, a coup. And I was asking myself, you see, we all know that African militaries, including ours, have been politicized in terms of how we recruit both officers and men, also in terms of how we promote and whom we appoint to positions of stay out of politics. You don't tinker with the professional processes that should be managed by CDSs in the management of these armed forces. Now, this has resonance. The points I've made have resonance with Burkina Faso. It is reported, and I have no doubt, that a massacre at Inata, an outpost in the northern part of Burkina Faso, for weeks, if not months, this outpost had been complaining about lack of combat supplies, food, water, ammunition, weapons, and nobody paid any attention to that. To the extent that these troops had to leave their camps and go and forage for goats and pigs and whatever it is. So they were massacred when the jihadists attacked. And 49, probably 50, if not more, coup in Burkina Faso. Why so? Because including this colonel, Lieutenant Colonel, who is now the leader of the MPRS or whatever it is, who went to the head of state, and I'm told they come from the same village, about 100 kilometers from Ouagadougou, to tell him that, look, we need to bring in the Agubna group. The president turned it down. It is reported that the government procured military helicopters or helicopters for the military, but then procured helicopters civil type that could not be used for the military. Otherwise, the helicopters probably could have. Tinkering with military matters, that the president was not listening to military advice. However, the president was going to dismiss some senior officers or officers who had voiced dissatisfaction with the incident at Inata that I mentioned. So instead of putting priority on the war effort and equipping the Burkinabe armed forces to be able to contain and defeat the jihadism, the government was not doing the same, was not doing so. So civilian governments, including our own, talk about principles that either they don't understand or they don't pay attention to. And rift with corruption, for instance, the military is going to push back. And we need to watch some of these practices. Now, I've alluded to the jihadist factor. It was 2011 when the conditions were created in Libya for the jihadism that we are seeing today to start evolving. Now, let's ask ourselves, what have our civilian governments in authority done? They have, and we are sitting down closer to the Atlantic. And what are we doing? We say we are securing our borders, when indeed the threat could echo off our own borders. We are not offering any assistance, despite the so-called talk about the African Standby Force, ECOWAS standby force that we have used.
Okay. Kanabwaji's line is breaking, unfortunately. But I wanted to bring in Professor Enin here quickly. Is the 5 countries more particularly that have suffered these. When you read around, you don't find the circumstances that have led to these coups, For example, in Mali, by the time they have succeeded, there were about 9 different attempts within 1 year or so. Then when you go to Burkina Faso, there are the reasons that go on there. Some analysts clearly single out countries like Nigeria, Ghana, that irrespective of the fact that you have youth frustration and unemployment bulging, Nigeria worse off, yet we shouldn't think of.
Well, Samson, it's always a difficulty in risk assessment in identifying when the tipping point is reached. What are the set of circumstances that will worsen and eventually ensure that the stability, the security, the 15 is that law enforcement faces in bringing about order, the violence that is accepted as a legitimate part of everyday politics. So something we are looking at so many things that individually can threaten states, but usually will combine in different ways to escalate the frustration, the sense of exclusion, and the anger.
Caters, deep corruption and manipulation of parliamentary election results. In Guinea, we could say that this was a reaction to Alpha Conde's attempt to change the constitution for a 3rd time. That was clear. So neighbors that don't have some of these don't have to.
What do you call it? I don't normally in my work like the word spillover because it is not that mechanistic. But there is a learning part that if it can be done in zone A, an influence of politically motivated violence that we see across the southern region. Okay. I mean, now Guinea has happened, Mali, Burkina Faso, northeastern Nigeria is a problem. Chad.
Sudan.
Let me come back to something that Kojo said in 30 seconds about the dusting of, when the Chadian case happened. Samson, I think you and I spoke about this. Mr. Debi's son promised us elections. And I think we're arguing that this is just talk. Okay, and now the processes of democratization a little bit. There is consistent failure of our multilateral institutions. First, to apply the rules that we have voluntarily signed on to in a consistent manner. And it is that inconsistency that we shit around it.
Colonel Festus Abwaji joins us back. What would you say? And I need us to be quick about this. Now, many analysts and the reports say that neighbors to coup countries and ECOWAS ought to be on higher alert. Higher alert. I think you ought to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I think to a large extent, I would agree with that proposition. First of all, what is going on is a contagion. Forget that the UN Secretary General called it an epidemic. And a contagion can spread in all manner of ways, especially if the conditions are right. So although there are some specificities of country context for these military coups, some of them could be found in West African so-called democratic states, including our own. So when, for instance, the president used the principle of free, fair, transparent elections, can Ghanaians really pump their chest and say that the last elections were free, fair, and transparent, including even the election of the speaker in parliament, including the processes of voter registration? Can we really say that the elections were free, fair, transparent? Have we consummated the outcomes of the elections? Why do we still have a pocket of citizens in this country who are disenfranchised, who don't have any representation? So what I'm trying to suggest is that we could find some of the grievances that have been used by militaries in other countries in our own country, and therefore we need to be very, very concerned. Corruption is here, as in Mali, as in Guinea, as in Burkina Faso. Political influence on the military or security services in those countries are also present in our own country. But civil military relations, for instance, about dismissing officers and so on, you know, about promotions and appointments that you cannot explain, that leaves other officers competent behind, creating frustrations, are also here. So to that extent, all of us need to be worried. If not, in fact, all of us need to be concerned, not worried, if I may put it. And then the last point I want to make is that I belong to the school of thought that you don't fight terrorism with only guns and bullets. Indeed, it will be more productive to address some of the socio-economic inequalities. And I don't need to be a political scientist or an economist to argue that in the northern parts of this country, bordering the countries that are unstable, there is gross socio-economic inequalities. We're not addressing that.
I wanted finally for you to answer for me. Despite all that you talk about, yes, SAL may represent, you know, the height of constitutional violation of the rights of, you know, the people there. And this is clearly historic. There's nothing like it before. Of course, in the elections, we are aware about 5 or how many people that got killed, and duty bearers can't seem to be really bothered because there don't seem to be that much action in that regard. In fact, there are people who got very peeved when a deputy speaker of parliament suggested that these lives didn't matter. The national security itself has identified that unemployment has become a question of insecurity in relation to terrorist activity and the rest of them. But in the midst of all of this and all the trouble that happens in parliament, can't we say that a country like Ghana is safe from all of these, you know, military upheavals?
We can't say that, Samson.
Why not? Why not? Because our democratic system is entrenched, is it not?
It is not. It is not entrenched. In fact, I would argue that it is a veneer. You know, and as Professor Kwesianin suggested, you see, if you single out the causative factors, you may say that Ghana may not experience some of these upheavals. We may wake up tomorrow and Ouagadougou would have fallen to the jihadists. The jihadists will be closer to our borders. Even the current military coup could evolve into some kind of civil war where another part of the military rises against the establishment. And therefore, we need to be concerned beyond what is going on in Mali.
Okay.
But the other point is that, you see, when we say that we are prosperous, our economy is doing well, our democracy is entrenched, it is not as simple as that. But in military studies, we are taught to pay attention to detail. Now, if people in this country cannot be paid, and you've just mentioned the case of the the lecturers. If there is unemployment, as huge as Professor Kwesi has suggested, the youth bulge and the youth unemployment, why on earth do we have a political class that shuttles around the world in chartered planes? For instance, why do we even want to begin to talk about buying a new presidential plane? Why do we, for instance, want to start talking about paying first ladies beyond the 49,000 or so that is paid to the president, when many millions of Ghanaians don't have the wherewithal to find the daily bread to put in their mouths?
Okay.
When schools are in dilapidated structures, children are lying on the ground to sleep. See, when you go into the details, you realize that this so-called prosperity is only for a few, including yourself and myself. The majority of Ghanaians are not part of that discussion.
That's right.
And we
That's
need
right.
to be worried because in a second, the emotions could go through the roof.
Okay.
And what is happening in some of these countries could begin to happen here.
Okay.
And I want us to pay attention to every Ghanaian and not to think that, you know, there are a few that we can take care of.
All right. Thank you very much, Colonel Festus Abuaji, for your time with us on the show. Let me have Professor Enin, your take briefly and finally on this before I conclude with Professor Kojo Appiah-Etua. Now, can't it be said that our democracy and security system is such that these things are unthinkable? We shouldn't think about them here in our parts of the world.
No, Samson, after 40 years in this business, I think it would be remiss on my part to use the word unthinkable. I mean, quality risk assessments should provide us with the capacity and the ability to make informed predictions and decisions. And I think what is happening around our neighbors, what we see within our own domestic setting, should serve as a cautionary tale that we need to be careful. We shouldn't take what we have for granted, and that both within and without, the forces that are clashing are highly combustible, highly dangerous, and can consume us if we are not careful.
That's serious. Thank you very much, Professor Kwesi Enin. And let me go back to Professor Kojo Appiah-Etua to end with him. And now, looking at the ECOWAS and the AU systems, it's very clear from listening to you that you share the view that these coup makers don't give a toss what these presidents gathering together, are talking about. So they are not listening to them in the end. So how do we get out of it? Analysts say this is a wave and neighbors must be on higher alert, particularly ECOWAS countries. So how do we get out of it if those who succeed are not listening? Hello, Prof.
Hello. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you very well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's okay now.
Right. So how do we get out of the wave? From Professor Enin, we should expect to see more. Reading around, you see the warnings that ECOWAS countries, neighbors to neighbors and ECOWAS countries must be on higher alert. When these people are not listening to anybody, how do we get out of this?
Well, I think the question comes down to the kind of constitutional arrangements, democratic arrangements we have in place. And so the idea is that we should make governance a workable concept that people would associate with and be able to be part of it. As it stands now, it is something that is not being enjoyed by everybody. Participation is low, and to be able to ensure that people get involved in governance, it has to be taken to the grassroots. Human security is where you look at whether in my local community, whether it is a district assembly or municipal assembly, I'm able to take part in governance. Issues around access to jobs, access to the Galamsey issue we're talking about. People are able to take part in discussing issues. The Tuaregs were dealing with the problem of the government. The jihadists took advantage of that. They did that in Mozambique. We have the situation in Burkina, in Boko, which is close to the border, as the colonel is saying. They are all situations which can explode. And so we shouldn't think that we are safe, because there's a lot of discussions around the problems we are facing, but the government will always come and try and think that that is not the case. And so we should just keep quiet and go about our business. But that cannot be the case. And so when we are not careful, then there can be that challenge and problem that we face. Going forward, what should be expected is that government should listen to the people, and governance should go to the doorsteps of the people, because we are not safe. As it is now, it's very volatile, and nobody can predict what could come next.
Reading some of the AU instruments and so on, I find that there is one thing that runs through them. They insist on rule of law, and the absence of which things will not work for Africa. In our very first show here on Newsfile, Dr. Benjamin Kumbo gave us a statement, and he highlighted a portion of the Constitution, that is Article 36, Article 36, Clause 2, particularly Clause 2E. And I read it again and ask you this question about it. It says that the state shall, in particular, take all necessary steps to establish a sound and healthy economy, whose underlying principles shall include E, the recognition that the most secure democracy is the one that assures the basic necessities of life, for its people as a fundamental duty. Professor Kofi Koshiga will say that this is the new basis of the rule of law in the world. Is this not the only solution that is required to stop these disturbances? Economic security.
That is correct. But when you look at the situation as it is now, the kind of democracy that we have, it is a caricatured form of democracy, which favors those that imposed that kind of democracy on us, whereby the benefits, first of all, go to the multinational companies. We give them grotesque tax reliefs, and they come and exploit their resources. They come and make sure that when they are operating the country, the rules don't apply, environmental rules and so on don't apply to them. And so in that situation, the beneficiaries of this democratic arrangement are these multinational corporations. Then we have governments that are within these countries, including our own, where the kind of democracy we have is a pseudo kind of democracy. So the beneficiaries also, they are able to benefit from the other resources that are left behind. Then you come to talk about the middle class, as Colonel is saying, that there are some people who are benefiting from that, including you and I in that respect. And people in that category don't talk about economic and social issues, because there you're talking about redistribution of resources. So the focus by the middle class, even when they have to agitate for something, is in the context of political rights and civil rights issues. So at the end of the day, the majority who are at the bottom do not benefit from the economic developments and economic circumstances of the people. And this is where the problem is. This is the people that people who want to agitate or foment trouble tap into and are able to capture their allegiance, and they can then foment trouble. Look at what happened in Nima not long ago. In some communities, people take up arms, land guardism and so on. They are all examples of what could happen when people are disenfranchised and people are not given the opportunity to work. Now, AU is saying that there can be unconstitutional changes. The unconstitutional changes government should be condemned and not be allowed to reign. But where people are so much disenfranchised and there's no opportunity for them to change government, which other way do they go? It is the military that they go to help them. To tap into their grievances, and as in that case, we have a bit are supposed to be an apolitical organization, right. And they come to power, as we say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they begin to enjoy that, right. And are not ready to leave the scene. Ideally, when there is no chance for changing government to occur, right. Where human rights violations are right, where the AU, ECOWAS are not ready to intervene, even though they have the power within their instruments to do so. And the military should guide the people to go to organize demonstrations and so on and overthrow the government. Or if they would organize a coup d'etat, they should not be allowed to take part in governance. They should hand over to the people. Okay. A similar situation like what happened in Sudan, where the civilians and the military made some kind of arrangements. That would have worked so that at this point in Sudan, the civilians would have taken over the transitional government and returned to the country to constitutional rule. This is how things can work and make ensure that there's security, there is respect for democracy.
Thank you.
Can, out of that, kind of democratic system for the group.
Thank you most sincerely. Professor Kwadwo Appiagyei Etua is Associate Professor of Law, University of Ghana. Colonel Festus Abuaje is author and consultant, and Professor Kwesi Enin is Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the KP Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Thank you all so very much for helping us discuss these matters. This show is brought to you by the kind sponsorship of Bank of Africa. Strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert and Sons, seeing is believing. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. DBS Industries, we are truly your Ruth experts. CBG, we stand with you. Fabrimental, your partner in steel. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. And the Barstow School. Start here, go everywhere. We'll be right back. E-levy is on. And UTAG, the university teachers. Are the universities going to shut down? We'll be back.
Government must make the offer this week, before the close of this week. And I'm sure if government heeds to this call, we would be able to quickly speak to members and then see, take their. But take note that the fact that we are saying, I'm asking the government must make an offer does not mean members will just accept anything because they are so concerned that the universities will be closed down. I keep saying, last week I said it, the university teacher is a very thinking person, a very discerning person, a very sophisticated person. And so you don't just treat him like rats. You can't do that and go scot-free. And so I will plead and I'll appeal that government should quickly find something, find good offers and make to UTAG. And I'm sure that once these things are done,
will reflect on it thoroughly and do the needful. All of us want to build this state, but we cannot build this state on an empty stomach. It is a fact.
Yes, that's true. We have had to take that hard decision to go to the High Court to force our directive. Yes, it's been 2 weeks since the Commission directed the striking workers to call off the strike and resume work whilst negotiation continues. Their representatives, that's the national executives, then appearing before the Commission, assured the Commission to abide by this directive. Unfortunately, they got back, and the opposite was the situation. And it's been 2 weeks, like I said, and the Commission cannot sit there, give directives, and watch it flouted. So we've had to take the hard decision of enforcing our decision at directive in court.
Just for emphasis and clarity, you're saying that when UTAG appeared before you, it was clear that it was going to obey the directive of the NLC.
It was not only clear by conduct, but expressly said they were going to oblige. So it's unfortunate,
So when can we expect you to file and head to court?
The process has been filed already, and it's been fixed for the 3rd of February.
UTAG is expected to respond to
respond and appear before the court on the 3rd of February.
But the concern of UTAG is that you have not been fair to them in this process, which is why they have been quite adamant
the
in
fairness or
adhering.
of it will be determined by the court. If the court says we are not fair, we wholly accept it and apologize if need be. If we are fair to, then they should go back to the lecture hall and discharge their part of the bargain with their employers.
Right, so you have been listening to Dr. Asa Asante at the University of Ghana on the UTAG strike. You heard Professor Ransford Jampo also speaking about it, and Ofosu Amwa of the NLC, that's the National Labour Commission. He is the Executive Secretary, also speaking about it. Well, he joins us for this discussion. Also joining us for this discussion is Kofi Bentel, Vice President, Imani Africa. And here in the studio is Dr. Samuel Nkumban, who is UTAG President, University of Ghana branch. Thank you, gentlemen, for making the time to join us.
Thank you.
All right. So something rather curious. I didn't know until recently your strikes brought these issues to the fore. It does appear that it is the migration of you guys onto the single salary pay structure that has worsened your circumstance. So the interim market premium for a lecturer with PhD as of December 2021 was 2,138 Ghana cedis, 30 pesos. So when I read that, I paused and laughed because that's less comparisons are not the best, but that's less the consultation fee for a good number of lawyers. That's just for 1 hour. Basic salary for a lecturer with PhD as of December 2021 was 4,103 cedis, 48 pesos. So let's cut a long story short. UTAG members feel that since they were migrated onto the salary structure, that is what has brought the problem. So these lecturers, as we talk about, their take-home pay as a professor, if you take the 20%, the tax deductions and so on away from it, you're looking at less than 5,000 cedis. And they believe that if they had not been migrated at this time, their interim market premium of 114% of basic salary would have been 9,000 Ghana cedis, and that would have led them to be entitled to about 10,260 Ghana cedis. So let's begin. Kofi, thank you for joining us. You've been teaching. I was going to say you've been a guest lecturer around some of the universities, but you have actually been a teacher on payroll.
Yes. I have been a lecturer for many years. My last position was Executive MBA, Teaching Services Marketing. And I left because of some of these things. It's almost as if wanting to teach means you are signing up to a life of penury. All right? And it's totally unfair because that is where we are going to create the human resource to change things in this country.
Kofi's line is frozen. This is terrible. Can we hope that that can be restored quickly so that he joins us back? Hello, Kofi. Kofi Bento's line. Hi, Kofi. Okay. So we will return to Kofi later about that. But yes, Dr. Nkumban, but why do you take the path that strike? And striking just when parents, in the circumstances of COVID, have found, perhaps used all their savings to pay admission fees and gotten their children to school. That is when you strike. They are looking for accommodation. People have rented places to live on near campuses. And for how many weeks now since school reopened, they've just been there without any productive work.
Yes, thank you very much. And I should say good morning to your listeners and viewers. It is not the case that we just took the decision to go on strike this January. If you recall, UTAG has been in the news over conditions of service for close to 4 years. And so it was in September 2019 that UTAG submitted a proposal to government for engagement in relation to poor conditions of service of UTAG members. And it took until sometime November 2020 for us to have a first meeting to draw up rules of engagement to begin a conversation on our conditions of service. And so for close to a year or more than a year, government was supposedly studying our document, and for which reason we never had any engagements. Fast forward, of course, we went into the electioneering of 2020, and thereafter, no calls came up for us to begin this conversation on our conditions of service. And so sometime mid-2021, we had to indicate that if government was not ready to engage with us, then of course we would have to take certain decisions, which included going on an industrial action as what is happening. And so we started a series of engagements. And in all of these, we had several meetings at which, under usual circumstances of fair play and good faith, we would expect that some stakeholders who ought to be in the meetings in order to make conversations meaningful by way of making commitments that bind on government, most of the time would not be in the meetings. And so, for example, on the side of government, we have the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, Ministry of Finance, and of course our sector ministry, Ministry of Education. Most of the time, these persons represented, unfortunately, Ministry of Finance, the representatives from Ministry of Finance were not ministers or deputy ministers that had capacity to be able to make firm commitments in terms of how much to be given for specific items of negotiation regarding the conditions of service which we had submitted. Of course, in July of 2021, UTAG threatened to go on strike. And that was when we started these engagements. And like I said, these elements of having to treat us without some element of serious respect led us into declaring an industrial action sometime in August of last year. Now, having done so, if you recall, the National Labour Commission went to court to try to stop us. Government sector also called to try to engage again. And in a meeting with the National Labour Commission and our stakeholders on the side of government, or our employer, we agreed on timelines within 1 month to ensure that all the negotiations of outstanding matters were cleared. And so this was supposed to be with effect from August 23 for 1 month of last year. That period is elapsed. The line items that we agreed on negotiating include, which were the outstanding matters, included the research component of our book and research allowances. It included market premium, and it also included non-basic salary allowance. We also agreed in this MOA that we signed on the 18th of August of last year that any other thing that both parties thought would inure to the improved conditions of service of UTAG members, we could bring that onto the table. And as we speak, these outstanding matters are still yet to be addressed. They were supposed to have been concluded by 22nd of September of last year. That didn't happen. And of course, we suspended the industrial action of August of last year in the hope of having this conversation done by 22nd September, and that come this year, we will not be where we are. So we resumed after the started engagement on the items that I've indicated were outstanding, for only our employer to indicate to us that market premium and the non-basic salary allowances could not be engaged, except for the research component of our allowances. And so we got done with the research component, which of course, general membership is of the view that the amounts that are given for research allowances are certainly patent in terms of being able to do any meaningful research. Remember also that our promotion, in other words, our condition of service is hinged on research output. And so, if for example, that our country is paying a lecturer 1,500 Ghana cedis as research allowance for the entire year, that comes up to less than 150 Ghana cedis per month. And so it is something that we requested, that beyond the MOA that was signed, when we have to get back to the table to engage the other outstanding matters, then of course we needed to bring back to the table the issue of research allowance. And so ultimately these are the happenings that have led us to where we are. On November 11, 2021, we had an executive committee meeting at UPSA, at which we issued a communique and also notified our stakeholders on the side of government that if by close of December, the labor market survey, which they are supposed to be conducting, was not ready and for implementation, then there was a need to put us back on the 114% of base pay as an interim market premium, which was what we enjoyed as of 2013. And December came to pass, and that didn't happen. On December 23rd, we still communicated to Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, the ministries that are part of this engagement, that December was coming to a close. And if that didn't happen, then of course, come January, we were not resuming. And so in all of those, no call-up came from the side of government for any engagement. But of course, we heard them on other platforms indicating that market premium is the preserve of government or the employer, and it is non-negotiable. The question we asked was whether or not the agreement we signed on the 18th of August, for which reason we suspended our strike, was it to deceive UTAG members to suspend the strike?
Hello, Kofi. Yes, go ahead. You need to unmute your mic.
Hello, Samson.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. Please go ahead.
I didn't hear you at all. Sorry.
Yeah, we lost you initially. You barely had spoken for 30 seconds and your line froze.
Yes. So I was saying that I think there is sufficient justification for the lecturers striking. I have followed a bit, and I think they have been disrespected. I think this country is not treating our intellectuals well. And to force them to this place where they almost have to sign up to a life of penury is really not right. And to bring them to the point where they virtually have to get onto the streets and, demonstrate for what is pittance, I think is totally unfair. And we can contrast that with what we see, in other spheres. For instance, with the life of an average politician, I do think that they should insist on what they're asking for. But the point must be made. If the government insists on being in charge of tertiary education, if the government insists on being the one that is solely funding education, then it should do it properly. Otherwise, the government can simply give them a budget because of their social and economic importance, and then allow them to function and to raise the money that they are capable of raising and to pay themselves the proper wages that they are capable of paying themselves. There are private universities in this country that do not have any government subvention, but are paying their lecturers better. So I think that if University of Ghana, with over 40,000 students and facilities already in place, has some amount of government budget and is left alone to raise the money that they can raise, they should be able to pay themselves better. When the issue of fair wages and salaries came up a number of years ago, one of the things that we wrote after studying the whole idea was that it was going to be a disaster because that kind of wage centralization was not going to work. And one of the things we said is that they should apply the competitor parity rule. If anybody can run a university without government subvention, then University of Ghana should be able to do better. Leave them alone, allow them to raise money. They can. They are doctors, they are intellectuals, they have labs, they have all kinds of facilities already in place. They have hostels. That place is a money-making machine. And trust me, people are making a lot of money there. So government should not insist on being the one to bankroll education.
But do you
if they
realize,
insist on doing that, then they should do it well.
Do you realize what you suggest is going to price the poor out of the education system?
Absolutely not. And again, if we had time, we would explain it. There has to be a scholarship arrangement. Government is paying money today to University of Ghana and to other institutions. That money should not be paid to the institution. Let the money follow the child. Let the money follow the person who has gained admission. Let the institution charge their fees. If somebody gains admission into the university, instead of paying to build this and build that, give that person a scholarship. A portion of that scholarship can even be a loan, so that afterwards they can pay you back. They will go to the school and pay as fees to the school and let the school run. Okay, so there are ways to do this, and we are not the ones going to start it. The bottom line is that government is spending too much in education, and we are getting too little out. And the people who are holding the education system up are basically being reduced to paupers, and it is just not right.
And when you say, like you say, you have repeated that a life of penury, they are being reduced to penury, it's because you are making comparisons. It's because you are thinking in your head yourself. You combine a number of professions as a lawyer as well, and then you go in to teach. When you go in to teach, your motivation is not what you take at the end of the month. There was this very interesting story. One of the universities in the wake of COVID, or I believe, decided that it was going to restructure its salaries and didn't consult with the lawyers who were teachers in the university for the law faculty of the school, and arbitrarily decided what they were supposed to earn. The lawyers resigned en bloc because money was not their motivation, but to give them what they looked at and felt they could earn in an hour for a month of service was very bad. The teaching profession is not a place to make money, is it?
Well, in a sense, it is not, because teaching is, a matter of calling and it's a passion. But something I can tell you that at universities elsewhere, there are lecturers who are millionaires, because that is where you do the groundbreaking research. That is where a lot of the innovations, etc., come from. And those people end up, porting some of their ideas to industry, and they make a lot of money. And then also, there are teachers who are able to live adequately just on their teaching salaries. So nobody is saying that you should make millionaires out of, university lecturers. But a professor, you and I have taken time to study, master's level, etc. Some of our colleagues have gone beyond that to PhD, etc. It should not be that somebody who has done the level of study we have done and is imparting that knowledge lives a life way below what we live. So my point is this: it is not acceptable that our professors and doctors and lecturers who have chosen to lecture cannot have a living wage, cannot have a dignified enough salary, which allows them to remain focused on teaching and creating the next generation of innovators. And I'm saying there's no reason for it. Because if you take a place at University of Ghana, if you give the University of Ghana to an average businessman and leave him alone, he will pay lecturers 4 times their salary. I have no doubt about it. We've all been there. We've seen the kind of economic arrangements that are possible in that field.
Yes, well,
so government should either take it up and do it well, or leave them alone and let them run this thing.
I've been talking to colleagues of mine that I left University of Ghana with, many years ago, and who are professors outside of the country, in the UK, in the US, in South Africa, and they can't believe that this is the circumstance that Ghanaian lecturers, and if you're talking about a PhD, that's approximately 22 years of education. That's what they are earning. But it is the comparison that is bringing the difficulty, is it not? Because the circumstances are not the same.
Well, Samson, again, it's no comparison. Even in Ghanaian standards, look, the richest people in our society are politicians, all right? They live the best lives, okay? An average young man is looking at becoming a politician because they go in there and within 1 or 2 political cycles, they are sorted out, all right? Now, that is possible within the same system because some people have engineered it that way. And what we are saying is that it does not make sense that somebody can build a private university from private funds, zero government funding, and run that university and pay lecturers well. And then the government has a university with legacy assets and resources already built, with multiples, thousands more of these people who are prepared also to pay. And indeed, a good fraction of, for instance, the people in the University of Ghana are fee paying. There are millions of dollars running through the school, whether grants or aid or whatever. So there's a lot of money washing.
What's your proposition to get out of this?
What I'm saying is that the paradigm, that economic structure, that creature that we have made out of our public universities is just wrong.
Right.
And it is not good enough. We are not comparing.
Now, the lecturers are saying that they have learned from previous experiences, including the 18th August agreement that led to they suspending their strike. And this time round, it is now or never. How do you propose we get out of this deadlock? Because it's certainly not fair to parents. It's not fair to students. They have paid fees, they have returned to school, They have paid hostel fees, they are back on campus, their parents have spent, and there's no productive activity.
Samson, I am a victim of that myself. I have paid fees, very serious fees, for 2 of my children. They are supposed to be in school, including paying for hostels, paying all kinds of monies, and they are back in my house eating my food. And I don't understand why. But I absolutely say that my colleague lecturers should not relent in this particular fight. Look, some of us have refused to go back into the classroom, except we are going to do it for free or something, because they make it not possible for you to want to create a life as an academic. And they have been disrespected consistently. You tell them, oh, we are going to come back. You don't come back. You tell them, oh, we are going to say something. You don't say anything. Look, the paradigm itself is wrong, and I disagree with them on a number of things. Okay, I have my views about the research allowance, and etc.
Okay.
But it all comes from this structure that we have built, which is moribund. It's not working.
I see.
But on how do we get out of it? There's only one way to get out of it.
Okay.
Respect these people. They deliver value. Respect them. When you say you are going to have a meeting with them, have the meeting. When you say you're going to sit down and come to a solution, sit down and come to a solution. If you promise that you're going to pay them something, pay it. When it comes to the political class, we find the money to do all kinds of weird things. But when it comes to the things that matter, we have a lot of excuses. So look, I am a victim of what is going on, but it has to be solved one way or the other. If we have a longer discussion, I'll tell you what our ideas are about solving it. But it includes
I want to pick just a minute of your view on this before I get back to Doc. You know, I'm reading the motion paper for interlocutory injunction by the National Labour Commission, which is to be argued on the 3rd of February. And they are simply saying that they want the court to compel UTAG to comply with its directive, that's the National Labour Commission's directive of the 13th of January 2022, to, among others, call off the industrial strike action and resume negotiations with its employers. Now, these applications, you can tell in our history, is always granted. And it is easy to grant because often the teachers are found to have breached the procedure.
Well, Samson, I'm a labor lawyer. You and I, we know we go to NLC, we go everywhere. We know there are serious limits to labor law. All right? Let me put it in short terms. It won't work. The courts are going to grant it. The lecturers are not going to mind them. And you can't do anything about it.
You mean
the way to resolve some of these things is to respect people.
Do you mean brutum fulmen?
What do you mean? Oh, it's absolutely a brutum fulmen.
But you don't encourage that as a lawyer.
Nothing will happen.
As a lawyer, you don't encourage that a court will make an order and it will not be obeyed.
No, get what I said. I said we are lawyers. And I said that by showing that we understand these things. I'm a labor lawyer. I've been to NLC, I've been to the court, but I'm saying that as somebody who understands how these things work, and also somebody who really wants them to work, we know the limits of labor law. And one of the limits is that a court can order you to stop a strike. You will not stop the strike. They can't do anything. They can't arrest all of you. Because indeed, you have other things that you are holding on to. So my suggestion to those running the system is that the law or the courts in such mass actions is not necessarily the silver bullet that solves everything. It can solve a number of things. But ultimately, what will solve these intractable problems is respecting the other party, sitting down with them, and making sure that you hear them and meet them at least halfway.
Right. So
you also have a right to demand certain things of them.
Yeah.
But the old idea of just ignoring them surely will not solve this problem.
Right, Dr. Samuel Nkumban, we have heard some of your members, even at executive level, already making comments that, well, you can go to court and you can even secure an injunction against that, but forget it. We will not get back to the classroom. Is it not rather the way to go that you negotiate with your employer, as the National Labour Commission is, suggesting to you and has directed you to do?
Thank you. We have said time and again that we cannot continue to negotiate in perpetuity. We have been at the table since 2019. we had a 1-month moratorium granted by the National Labour Commission that within this period, get this done. How many months down the line? September 22nd, we should have gotten this done by way of negotiation. We have not gotten that done. What has the National Labour Commission done to the side of government who caused us to suspend our industrial action of August last year and to go into a negotiation within a month period by which time we should have sorted all of these? And we have.
What are you thinking? What can the National Labour Commission do to
call it off? It hasn't add up on the side of membership.
Have you thought of the potential that that is if the injunction is granted? We do not know if it will be granted or not. But like I suggested, I think often it is granted and the public is outraged, and the accusation is that the National Labour Commission is government, the courts also wants to support government, but you will find that it is easy for a judge to grant because you have breached procedure. And sometimes procedure is as important as a substantive law. Have you thought of the consequence of, if it is granted, you losing your salary, not getting paid for the period you might want to stay on strike?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I really would not want to double into the legal matters, but to also indicate that our members are of the view that if they know they are sitting at home without getting paid, they are better off than doing what they are doing and earning what they are earning, which is not commensurate with what it is that they do. You look at the processes of having to go through school to get a PhD. On the average, your school fees is 10,000 Ghana cedis for 4 years minimum. And your accommodation is not part. Your research is not part. And then you finish PhD and come. If you were, you are a journalist, you can find this out from even Get Fund, which we have established with our taxpayers' money, that students that Ghana Get Fund sends abroad earns a stipend higher than a lecturer in this university in the country. That if you were studying, say, in Germany for a PhD on Get Fund scholarship, you may be earning something in the range of 1,500 euros. Or that you were going to UK and you are earning something in the range of 1,334 pounds.
The philosophy behind using state funds to support a PhD research student is that this is a contribution for the country.
Yes.
For the future of the country.
Agreed.
It's not something you are supposed to read back, because these are the people who will come and continue to hold the engine of training the next generation.
The question is if they will come, because if I'm earning 1,330 or 1,300 pounds per month, and I'm supposed to get done with a PhD in UK and come back to the country and be paid less than $1,000, I'm not sure such a person is going to come back.
Yeah, we know a number don't come back.
They won't come back. And besides, those who have come back, I can give you examples from the University of Ghana where I work, that over the last 3-4 years, you can count the number of people who are in politics, who were lecturers. You can count the number of people who have left for other opportunities. Fine Cambridge scholar, psychology department. November last year, he left after 5 years of service because he couldn't just take it anymore. You know, somebody is appointed from Zimbabwe who is holding the position as a lecturer, and the person is appointed to KNUST as a senior lecturer. And he writes to simply ridicule us.
I saw that letter.
You saw that letter. And these are things we presented. Our neighboring countries, Burkina Faso, Benin, and Nigeria, and what have you, we've done salary comparisons. And it's as though Ghana with a higher GDP is the one that is paying the least.
Our economy is in trouble. Our economy is in trouble.
Our GDP is higher than those other countries.
Our economy is in trouble. If we don't get E-levy passed to rake in 6 billion, the economy will collapse. So we go to IMF.
It doesn't look like that when you look at some of the Christmas decorations that happened quite recently. So we can appreciate the fact that it is not good. If it is not good, what are you offering? It is not just okay to say blanketly that there's no money.
Okay.
And you are not making any offers. And Many of the times I've heard them say, oh, we've increased, for example, electricity subsidy by over
So what?
1,000%.
Your employer has simply ignored you?
That is how we feel. Because if not, or that they have deceived us. If not, we have signed an agreement that we're going to engage market premium, we're going to engage non-basic salary allowance, and we're going to engage base pay. Base pay, you said we had to wait for public sector joint negotiating committee. That is understandable. Then, soon after the labor market survey report is released, the next thing we hear in the media is that it is not negotiable.
Okay, so immediately, in actual fact, some very 2 minutes or so, tell me what ought to be done to get you back.
So,
beyond immediate announcement that what you want has been granted.
What we want has been granted is the immediate thing that gets us back. And what it is that we want is simple. Like you made the analysis from the very beginning. History has said that from His Excellency Kufuor's time, we negotiated a roadmap that ended in 2008. In 2008, the entry point of a lecturer with a PhD was the CD equivalent of $1,500. Then we could not be migrated onto the single spine with a dollarized salary. And in a 5-day marathon negotiations at Pram Pram, an agreement was reached for the 114% as base pay for interim market premium. Now, this was supposed to run along with annual increases in base pay because it's a percentage of basic pay. 2013, a white paper is issued that freezes this at that point because a labor market survey had to be done for a market premium to be determined. The white paper actually deals with implementation of a market premium, not an interim market premium. Then, in 2014, the labor market survey report is done. It's duly signed by the authorized researchers. And no implementation has happened. 9 years down the line, we have another labor market survey report, duly delivered. What is the guarantee that this is going to see the light of day? And for us, the indication is that if you were to take current basic salary as against what 114% was supposed to be, it has reduced to 52% of basic salary. So we don't get the 114%. Make up the difference as an interim, and then we can come back to the classroom whilst we make progress in terms of conversing on the new labor market survey and a determination of a market premium. In actual fact, reference to the white paper, which deals with implementation of a market premium, for us is neither here nor there because there is no market premium. What we are engaged with is an interim.
So as we understand, the universities are likely to be shut down?
Well,
because that may be a better alternative than what is happening now, that people are, expecting their children and their wards to be learning and they are just in school.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, there is an unwritten rule that suggests that after 3 weeks, but of course, it's not a decision to be made by UTAG as an association. It is a decision to be made by the managements of the universities. And so, as it stands, we're holding on to...
Since school resumed, you've done how many?
Well, lectures for University of Ghana was supposed to have started on the 17th, but from the 10th, in fact, as far back as the 5th, registration and other activities of orientation for freshers started. So if they want to use start of lectures as a basis, then we still will have one more week to go.
All right, thank you very much for your time. I did announce that Mr. Ofosu Amoah, who is the Executive Secretary of the National Labour Commission, Mr. Asamoah, was joining us. Unfortunately, he has not been available as previously arranged. So I have been talking to Dr. Samuel Nkumban, who is UTAG President, University of Ghana branch, and Kofi Bentil, who is lawyer and Vice President, Imani, Ghana. Let me now share some of your views as we take a break and return to ask the question whether E-levy will survive. Nyavo John says, UTAG, stand your ground and don't kowtow kowtow to any form of intimidation or whatever, because this is a government that believes teachers can't be millionaires, and looking back into history, told some teachers that their reward is in heaven, whilst they take theirs on earth. Is that your name? The Veil 760. My only problem with UTAG is that over the years, their research have not reflected in the quality of students produced by Ghanaian universities. Armchair research is too much, considering the fact that research publications are a major factor in promoting university teachers. Are you speaking from a point of fact? If you get to our universities, you will know that a lot of research is going on, and current research, in fact. This one from Akosia says, these people don't respect you for who you are, because if they do, they would have seen that both your actions and that of theirs are creating a creator in the university's calendar, and those at the receiving end of this whole brouhaha are the students and their parents or guardians. That's from Akosia. And we hear from students also that they are planning to embark on a demonstration against government, the employer rather. Citizen Yao says, Samson, I want to know why GIMPA, a public university, is run as a state enterprise and other universities are not run the same way. Is GIMPA on a special treat to other public universities? Yes, GIMPA has some special status it enjoys. Akilu Faram says, if a constitutionally elected government tend to rule unconstitutionally, it is just fair to see the coup d'etats as safer module of interventions. Coup d'etat by itself isn't bad in context. It is a model of intervention to take care of corrupt governments. This is Debat Vida, says that the current democratic system currently operating, and you are talking about the coups, currently operating in Africa is a scam because citizens have been frustrated or their rights have been deprived, including silencing renowned voices and opinions through intimidation and victimization. Kofi Boateng J says, to be frank, this is not a democracy. We are disillusioned. If we think this grotesque and inhumane political system is democratic, we just want to be safe, whereas the majority of lives in our country suffer. We must wake up or be engulfed. Let's not mince words. Thank you very much for your messages. Also, this is Newsfile. We take a quick break and return to ask whether or not the E-levy will survive.
The majority leader was of the view that if we start, we must finish. And that is what we're giving the indication to him, that then we should either start now or, we adjourn. Because we were ready to start. But we're saying that if you were not ready to start, then we should adjourn the House because we had waited for too long. And clearly, they are not ready to start and they are not even ready to conclude. We are ready for any. We were ready for any. We were ready to start, debate, and either suspend the question or even decide on the question today. We're ready for it. The majority will be in the right place to tell you the status of the E-levy. As far as we are concerned as a minority, our position against the E-levy remain unchanged, despite the fact that today at an extended leadership meeting it was announced to us that government is considering a reduction of the rate from 1.75 to 1.5. They also, in fact, at that meeting it was indicated to them that then they may need to come with a new bill, because that will completely change the structure of the first bill that was presented. All these technicalities will have to be considered, even if Parliament will look at the proposal to reduce it from 1.75 to 1.5. But 1.75, 1.5, we remain opposed to it. We are determined to vote against it no matter.
I am unable to give details of discussions held so far. What I can say is that discussions so far have been positive but inconclusive. I do not want to respond to political punchlines, since same may have the potential of derailing all the positive steps we've been taking so far. I shall rely on my earlier submission and say that we are optimistic that if all things go well, we are likely to proceed by consensus. But that notwithstanding, we also concede that as a matter of principle, our friends have taken a position, be it ideological or party policy decision. And in such a situation, it becomes very difficult to build consensus. What you can achieve is to get their cooperation in disagreement. When somebody disagrees and cooperates, then it's all about nation Ghana. So we'll get somewhere. We'll get somewhere. I mean, whether we're able to achieve consensus or we're able to respect their position, to disagree with us, but cooperate within the remit of the process. Next week, God willing, once we have life, we'll be able to determine.
The law is quite clear, and the constitution is quite clear. The standing order is quite clear on what's supposed to be done. The numbers. I mean, we know our numbers. Yes, we would take it if we have the numbers. We are not going to have another of those scenes in Parliament again. I mean, a situation where the Speaker is not around, and then we decide that, we decide a constitutional imperative that one of the deputies should sit in his stead. The two of them constitute part of our 138. Right. So obviously, if they have full force of 137, and then we are reduced by one because of the absence of Babing, would have 137 or the one sitting as the speaker. That is what has been creating all the the problem. Baliho in Parliament, all the insanity that's been breaking loose in Parliament is because of this scenario. I don't think we'll come to repeat such scenario.
So if the speaker is not there, no E-levy?
No, there won't be E-levy. I'm clear in my mind. We would have...
Is that the decision of the majority?
I am telling you what I think is, I haven't spoken to the leader about it, but I think he must be clear in his mind about this. If the speaker is not sitting, and we have 137, how are we going to get the numbers? I mean, we're going to fight again? If the guys remain in the mood that, if you say that they are larger constituency, but I've told them to fight, I don't believe that. I'm clear in my mind that they advise them to oppose it as much as they could.
Right. So... you've been listening to Afenyo Marking and was it Suhini? Al-Hassan Suhini also on the E-levy. Last night, somehow, it was interesting in Parliament. Let me introduce my guests, and they may help us with explanation as to what was happening in Parliament yet again yesterday. I guess that Dr. Stephen Amua, he's MP in Shiaiso. So we've known each other for upwards of 20 years, and I'm familiar with calling him Sticker rather than Stephen Amwa. Kofi Bento, Vice President Imani Africa, is still on Zoom with us, and Godwin Eduji Kujo Tameklo is a member, legal and communications team of the National Democratic Congress. Gentlemen, thank you very much and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Right. So briefly, in a minute, Doc, can you tell us what happened in Parliament yesterday? It looks like, once again, the majority held the House hostage until sometime around 6 p.m. that you realized that things were not just going to work, and it postponed it.
I don't know.
You tell me, I'm asking.
What I know is what I'm going to say.
All right.
Even Joy FM here, I always use this terminology or phrase, and sometimes people want to make ridicule out of it. You understand asymmetric information. That even not every internal stakeholder here is privy to every relevant or irrelevant piece of information.
That's right.
So there are certain levels of communication I can't speak to them directly simply because I may not be privy to the facts. What I know is that yesterday, not necessarily the numbers, I wouldn't know, because a lot of my brothers from the other side were in the house. We were in the house. I hadn't counted. They have different levels of responsibilities, and who is in charge of bringing word to word for deliberations and for discussions and for comments and for whatever decision you want to take. And what I know is that it got to a point they had to adjourn the house. Practically, this is what I can say.
All right.
Because I'm not part of the leadership.
Yeah, but there was a time that Chairman Sabonso, the majority leader, had given an assurance that in a matter of 1 hour or so, they were waiting for something and they will get to know whether or not the bill, E-levy bill, will be laid or will not be laid. And so the uncertainty was generated from the majority side.
You think it's the only majority that decides what to be done in-house? You are not in parliament, but I think it's a legal process.
The majority leader, who is the leader of government business,
okay, yeah, sure.
was supposed to ensure that the bill comes to the House. So if he doesn't come, it's government side.
Okay. No, just one, be honest, you are teaching me. I'm being very honest with you. You are teaching me. You know, I've been in parliament not quite long ago. Some of the procedures, orders and stuff like that in government businesses, I may not have known all of them in their entirety or understand the entire. Okay.
So this meant to just be a preliminary
all that I know
inquiry.
Is that we could not. And that at the right time, officially, this whole E-levy thing will come to pass.
That's Tuesday.
I can't be here and give definite date. So that
all right.
They will say
what's your understanding from your end, Edwigi? What's your understanding from your end about what went on in the House yesterday?
I think it's pretty obvious. Once again, good morning to your viewers. It's pretty obvious that the leadership of the majority are unable to marshal the numbers required for the purposes of carrying the E-levy through. In fact, if you look at the order paper for yesterday, the whole order paper had no E-levy. And I was monitoring. It was very late in the evening when the issue of E-levy came in. And I recall very well the minority leader, my very respected, distinguished senior lawyer, Haruna Idrisu, and Mutaka raised the issue that if you are putting up that bill now, we have to debate and vote on it. It's obvious that the majority do not have the numbers. And so they deliberately kept shifting, to the point that the speaker had no other option almost around 5 p.m. to even threaten that he wants to leave, among other things. So let the record be set straight.
The speaker actually left.
Yes, I saw him
on account of also announcing that he's been there waiting.
And you see the challenge that I have is that you see anytime this thing happen, the communication is tilted against the Speaker of Parliament, as though he's the one being obstructionist. But where you have the whole day, an urgent issue like E-levy, you're unable to present it. You wait when MPs are exhausted, then you introduce it. It is unfair, even to the Speaker. It's unfair to even your own colleague MPs. And that is why I think that the majority leader must begin to demonstrate leadership. If you don't have the numbers, if you're unable to marshal the numbers, be frank with the people of this country.
Can you say?
Interesting. Kofi, what will you say briefly, watching what happened in the House? Yes.
Respectfully, I think his comment about the majority leader is not fair. Because you cannot say you're privy to everything for you to conclude that he has to demonstrate leadership.
Because he didn't show some.
What you are saying.
All right, thank you. Yes, Kofi Bento, I was asking, watching from wherever you were, what would be your comment about the developments in Parliament yesterday? Fortunately, there was no fight.
We are all watching, and sometimes it's very interesting how people come and spin and expect that we'll believe it, assuming that we don't know what is going on. It is very clear that the only reason why this matter has not come to the floor is because the majority simply does not have the number. If they had the numbers, they will be on the floor and they'll be pushing this through. It is very clear that the E-levy is extremely unpopular. Extremely unpopular. Now, when you combine these two things, it is giving the NDC a lot of energy to continue to fight it. It will only take brute force for this government to pass it. And even if they do, they will pay a very high price for
but
it.
Is it accurate to say that it's extremely unpopular? The government has begun, town hall meetings to consult with members of the public across the country. I don't know if it is over yet. They went to Takoradi, Koforidia, and if after that it was being tabled, it does suggest to me that that consultation that was spoken about is terminated. But at that town hall, you saw and heard those who attended. They are almost like unanimous. They are for it. You heard pastors and the rest of them who were clear that this is good. We need it.
Well, Samson, again, that is part of the spin that I say we are all watching. And it looks like somebody is assuming that, honestly, we are all stupid. In the first place, when this thing went bad, we came on this show, they told us that they have passed it. Samson, remember I told you, it has not been. So they've gone back to do the so-called consultation so they can tick the box that we consulted. And in doing that, they are creating these crowds of selected people, excluding other people, as if we won't know, as if we can't tell. If they want to do consultation, it is very easy. You can do it. If you want honest feedback, you can get it. But nobody should spin and expect that we will sit back and then you hold a certain number of forums, you park 32 Land Cruisers over there to pay for E-levy, and you come back and say, we have consulted. Other people are saying so. Joy FM did a simple poll, and it showed, stop the next 10 people you meet on the street and ask them whether they are for E-levy or not. So look, Samson, there's too much spin, and now the spin has gotten to the point where it is disrespect of our intelligence. If the government wants proper feedback, it can get it. In fact, there are actually alternatives to E-levy. There are ways to solve the problem.
Right.
What they want, to use a blunt instrument to get what they want.
I'll return to you on that. But Eduji, is the minority not being inconsiderate, not being uncompromising, unnecessarily when concessions are being made from 1.75 to 1.5? Minority still says, hell no. What does the minority want?
Samson, first of all, there's nothing about being intransigent relative to this E-levy matter. On principle, we agree with the position canvassed by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in the studios of Peace FM that it is unconscionable to tax mobile money transactions.
That's his personal
view. Please, I'm coming there. I'm coming. He makes the point that it is one of the surest medium of transfer by poor people. And we associate as a social democratic party with that position. We are not going to change that position, not now and not in the future.
Dr. Bawumia is not the president.
He is the chairman of the economic management team.
Yes, he can't.
And I do not think that you want to doubt his understanding or appreciation of economic matters. I do not think so. The MPP and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia today, as we speak, has not spoken about this E-levy issue to date. What does it tell you? The level of policy inconsistency, to the extent that a government puts something up, now tells you, after introducing the thing, that it is now going to do consultation. Who does that? You have introduced a bill. In fact, you wanted it passed as early as in November. There has been resistance. Then you quickly come around and say, look, you are now going to consult on it. Quite clearly, it is either you are incompetent or you take others as not being intelligent. But what is the record? The minority and the NDC have made this point clear, that we are unable to associate with the passage of the E-levy because it offends certain fundamental principles of taxation. One of the basic canons of taxation is the principle of fairness. Today, if E-levy is passed and becomes law, if you and I should go into the same shop and I have money, fiscal cash, and I pay, I do not pay this levy. But once you pay with the E or electronic way, you will pay. How come that the same...
Make it discriminatory.
Completely discriminatory. And so it offends the principle of fairness in tax administration. Fundamental principle. And government spin doctors have not been able to really speak to this issue of fairness. Two, this is a government that says they are moving and digitalization, digital economy, and that they want this economy should be cash light and not cash heavy in terms of how we manage our transaction. Now, if you are going to tax people's momo, monies in their bank account, invariably, what you are basically doing is to serve as a disincentive to people to use electronic means of, transaction. So, on that principle alone, we are opposed to it. No, we have also made a point that, look, when money is in your wallet, it is as good as money under your pillow. It is savings. Nowhere on earth is savings taxed. You don't tax savings. It is not income. So, to suggest that by moving your money, even your salary, you'll pay your income tax on your salary. By the mere fact that you are moving your salary onto your wallet, your Momo wallet, you are going to pay for it. Now, when you transfer that money to your mother in the village, you pay that tax on it. Who does this?
There's a threshold, though.
No, but the threshold is just 100. That's below 100. Any other thing immediately kicks in the issue of the taxation. But you see, we have made a point that why in God's name that this government need that tax at this crucial point? And I have listened to the Minister of Information say that the whole tax will give us about 6 billion Ghana cedi. That's $1 billion within the year. And that if we do not get the E-levy tax through, they may have the option of going to the IMF for a bailout. And that they do not want, and that there's a political consequence to pay for going to the IMF. We are saying that the only reason why this incompetent government is resisting the offer of going to the IMF is a very simple one. IMF is going to control the luxury, the profligate expenses by this government, and they cannot stand it. Look, I recall one of the things that the finance minister said was the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You recall?
That's right.
And that the passage of that law was going to keep government finances in check. What has happened?
Not only the finance minister, almost everybody in government.
Absolutely. As we speak today, the Fiscal Responsibility Act has been jettisoned under the rubrics of COVID. But we know that the expenses that we've done with COVID, you have refused a bipartisan engagement to account for the COVID expenses. So the ordinary Ghanaian out there is asking a very simple question. If you are refusing to account for what we have given to you, what is the assurance that if we give you more, you account for it? This is a government that can look us in the face and say, in the most arrogant manner, that to disclose how much our president is using for his luxurious private jet, travels, it is national security. Who does that? We have never asked President Akufo-Addo to tell us his conversation with President Angela Merkel or whoever, all we are asking is that, as taxpayers, one of the ethos of the 1992 Constitution is the principle of transparency, probity, and accountability. So when we give you our tax money, which is not yours, of course, you have every responsibility to us to let us know how much you have expended the money. You tell us it's national security, and so we should give you more. In any case, with the greatest respect to my brother here, when this administration came to power, they quickly put before Parliament the capping and realignment law. You recall? By reason of the capping and realignment law, proceeds into road fund and among other statutory funds have been capped. Now, over 1.9 billion Ghana cedis is supposed to go to road fund. You give road fund only 800 million. The rest, you say you are using it for other things. Now today you say you need E-levy in order to do roads. What was the reason for the road fund? So you have not demonstrated candor in the management of our public finances.
Okay.
This morning, 30 seconds before he comes in, this morning I heard you, when you went through the Auditor General's reports, E-levy is supposed to give us 6 billion. The Auditor General's report for the year ending December 2020 put a figure of 12.8 billion as the total value of financial irregularities. Cash irregularity alone is 1.8 billion Ghana cedis. And you say you need Momo to give you 6 billion. You have not demonstrated any prudence in the management of the public finances of this country.
Right.
So the majority, the minority, and the NDC, we are never going to be part of this Momo.
Completely opposed.
Completely opposed. Completely opposed.
Okay. Stephen, forgive me, I almost said sticker.
No, it's okay.
You pardon me.
Sticker is fine. I'm very fine.
Right.
At least it's all about people know I'm the one who's speaking.
Okay, right. Now, before you respond to him, I want you to listen to His Excellency the President when he started and he was excited that he was cutting taxes. Why is he not listening now? Let's listen to the President. President on the 5th of April 2017, and he says he started cutting nuisance taxes. He's taking them off. Sir Tekpe says this is the height of nuisance tax. And look at the opposition, the intensity of the opposition to this tax. Why is the president bent on having this done?
Thank you very much. My regards to our viewers this morning, and thank you for putting me on this, to me, the most prestigious platform in our country today. Something, I'll just use LIFO, last in, first out, from all that you said. Haven't you also heard, or are you not aware, that the same opposition publicly saying that if we pass this bill, we'll be unpopular and that we'll lose 2024 elections? So now the opposition wants us to continue governing. You see, one thing about Ghana is I sometimes don't have too much or too many issues with my NDC brothers because they want to come to power and they will use everything, whether wrong or right, analyze things, But some of my problems I have are with the experts and the professionals in our country, the commentators who claim they are not politicians. Once the person, there's underlying interest for the government or against the government, it influences the person's statement. We are not doing Ghana any good. Something. The president said that yes, the essence of tax policy, in a way, is quite calibrative in nature, or calibration in nature. Forgive my vocabulary. You do as and when it's necessary for you to increase taxes or reduce taxes or impose new ones. between 2014 and 2016, taxes introduced or imposed on us amounting to about 26. Go and check the budget and the NDC. In fact, 2017, taxes reduced or entirely extracted away, amounting to almost 16 tax components under His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. It is telling you that we haven't been perfect, but in terms of even net increase in taxes or decrease, this government has shown good faith with the people. In any case, there is nowhere in the world that any individual is interested in paying taxes, which will have impact on the person's disposable income. So people who are saying that Ghanaians are not happy, since when Ghanaians have shown so happy publicly that this particular tax, we are happy with it? And even who has done any practically acceptable research with sample sizes and other things to show that we can extrapolate and say that over 15 million of Ghanaians out of over 31 million, they say they don't want it. And even the fact that some Ghanaians say they don't want it doesn't mean that they are right or wrong, because maybe where the government had to do something which is normally not done, but what is happening, how many tax policies pass, we engage broader stakeholders and do education before. Don't let us keep on deceiving people. Why are we doing this? We should find out, is it timely? Do we need it? What has caused this? For about 22 months, Samson, Ghana, including other countries, nobody, when you say just one thing, they say everything you blame on. Generation.
You have covered levy. You also have the World Bank that has been supporting you with funding for COVID-19.
All these things are true, but have we also juxtaposed that with the obligations of the government and say that they are enough? They should come and tell us that in the area of education, in the area of health, in the area of pro-poor policies that we have all implemented, infrastructure, our interest payments getting to, if you project about 37 billion, which is as a result of cumulated debt. Even some of the debt, probably MPP collected or NDC collected, but the maturity date comes now for somebody to pay. Have we done that to juxtapose this against that? Have we analyzed our fiscal space for us to say that this is going to help us or not? All that I'm saying is that nobody wants to pay tax. But the situation we find ourselves in, do you know that even now, per the PFM Act, 2016, I think Act 981 or whatever, Section 18 stipulates that even in times such as this, our fiscal rules and policies upon consultation should be suspended. That you can, it's there clearly. It stated war, natural disaster, and health epidemic, which of course, like pandemic. So we should understand the fact that through no fault of this government, a lot of things have gone down the drain that have remarkably, you cannot say 100% everything. So if we are analyzing this and talking about alternatives, we should understand the fact that we should be able to provide concrete and comprehensive work that are practically feasible and timely. That with this, we can solve our problems. But we don't make, look, here's the case that university lecturers, respectfully, are driving home for new concessions that will put burdens on already congested budget pace. I agree with them that they should be given what they deserve. My only challenge is the time, because they were being paid practically, but they were not practically getting the full stream of their work. And not only them, other public service, they were even at home. So we have a matrix of factors that...
No, as for universities, because of the of the use of Zoom and other, virtual platforms, they were working.
I agree.
They were working and they were getting paid for working.
And they were working, no, but ask yourself, that somebody who's driving his car every day to work and back, are we going to spend the same thing? Even in terms of effectiveness, students having time to ask questions. Do you give an assignment and marking them? I'm not saying they are not working. I'm not saying what they are demanding is not due them. I agree. Okay. But I'm saying that the same government for about 22 months has been going through making expenditures that probably we are not deriving the needed productivity, leading to even the low growth of our economy, which you cannot do anything about. 2, this country as a whole, our effective tax rate has been negative, whether in DCMPP, whether COVID or no COVID. And that is subtracting your transfers to the households in terms of what government outlay from our taxes over total revenue. 3, within the sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana is one of the weakest countries in terms of what we generate as revenue. 4, our revenue generation as a percentage of our GDP has not been nowhere close to the benchmark within the developing economies and the developed economy. We cannot discuss issues out of arbitrariness and propaganda and where one's interest is. But let us be holistic with this issue. NDC understand them because they want to come to power. But the so-called experts should provide needed relevant pieces of information out of well-collected research data points so that we can support them. Something. Let's face the facts. Impression being created wrongly, just as my brother here just said, incompetent government, managing economy this. Why can't Ghanaians, with all the experts, be honest? I'm not saying they are not honest. They are great people. They are even better than me. But that's my also proposition. That they should, rather than sample all the performance parameters, okay, what Akufo-Addo's government took over in the area of the economy, and said that Akufo-Addo government, A, interest rate was 10, now it's 20. 2, treasury bills rate this, it was that, now this. 4, inflation rate was this, now this. 3, then we can know that in terms of aggregate performance, because I don't know anything at all, interest rate was way over 30%. Now you can get some around 21.
People like to look at the bigger issues.
And this one is not the bigger issue.
They are kinky and fish. They are looking at the historic borrowing. Historic borrowing you have done, that no government,
can I answer you?
Several governments put together don't match. You just mentioned 26 taxes the NDC had, and you came and removed 16. You know, I didn't ask you because I hear you guys say it, but you don't provide the evidence for it.
We don't do what?
You don't provide the evidence for it.
For the tax?
Yes.
Oh, in Parliament we did. Go to their, it's in their budget. This one is not hearsay.
Really?
Oh, please. In Parliament, NDC stated 11. And we stated 26 in Parliament, as a matter of fact. So it's in the hand side. You can go and check.
Now hold on, let
me answer this question, I beg you. You first said something that, Kinky, something, the fact that somebody, my illiterate mother at home, does not understand tetracycline and quinine, doesn't mean it's not factual, that solves health problems.
That's true.
Then you raise a second issue. What is it?
Because it's all right.
Wait,
hold on. Kofi.
No, let me answer this first.
Kofi,
I beg you.
I'm coming.
1 minute, I beg you.
Okay, go ahead.
You also talk about increment in our debt record. Something, it is on record with facts and figures that the two fraternities, leading fraternities, we are better. Between 2008 and 2016, we increased this country's debt portfolio over 1,000%. From 9.2.
I'm not talking about percentages.
So what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the actual.
We are talking increment, what you have added, because they are cumulative. Between 2012 to 2016, they increased it over 240%.
But what I said is
there was no COVID.
It's not. It cannot be controverted.
No. I'm a finance person.
Yes, I know.
I'm giving you financial.
Look, you have a PhD in this area, and I won't try to contest you.
And two, the timings are different because COVID actually impacted the other arm of financing, which is revenue, and forced government to concentrate more, probably or remarkably, on debt financing.
Okay.
So any honest professor or doctor on this earth should come and explain the fact that GDP couldn't have grown when markets were slow.
Okay. Thank you.
Impairment of our productivity.
Thank you.
Leading to that.
Kofi, now you were talking about alternatives. On our very first show, I hosted Bright Simmons. He took just within 15 minutes made a presentation that looked at the whole situation and the alternatives that should be looked at. We have heard Dr. Kwabena Duffuor, former governor of the Bank of Ghana, suggest that, look, you are using E-levy, you are going to get 6 billion, about 7 billion. But there are other things on the table. It's not about taxes, really. It's about raising money. Dr. Duffuor says our estimates show that by adopting the same approach that Ghana's peers use to generate revenue from their extractive sector, Ghana can generate additional 4.5 billion US dollars. 4.5 billion US dollars from the sector each year. He explained that the money would amount to 25 billion, we're not talking 6 billion, 25 billion cedis, far more than the 6.9 billion cedis expected to be raked in from the E-levy in 2020. Why do you think government is bent on the E-levy and doesn't seem to want to listen to any other thing?
It is because the E-levy is the lazy man's approach. It is low-hanging fruit. It is easy money. Okay, they see a lot of liquidity in the telco sector, and they believe that we should just reach in and take some of it. Look, because of time, let me make a few statements. One, the points that Dr. Duffuor made are points that many researchers have come to. There are little differences here and there, but we are quite sure that a better readjustment of our tax system will yield far more money, especially a focus on the extractive sector. We are quite sure that a better exemptions policy will yield far more money. Another thing we are sure about is that E-levy will not give us the kind of money we are looking for. So it's clear to me that this is just easy money they can grab and then they can run and hope that somehow time will give us a better idea. We have a systemic tax collection problem, and that is rooted in the laziness of our leaders. Okay, somebody made a point that big houses in Laboni are not paying enough property tax. Then I asked the person, why are they not paying enough property tax? How difficult is it to find big houses in Laboni? How difficult is it to go there and value the house and charge them the tax? Why are they not doing so?
Especially now that the vice president touts and clearly true has led this digitization process to get us easy ways to find where everybody is.
Very easy ways of doing it. So the point I'm making is, if you ask why this E-levy, because it's easy, it's the lazy man's approach. Now, the saddest part of it is this. You can read on brycesimmons.com. Our calculation shows that indeed they may end up getting lower taxes out of this. Okay, so even though it's a lazy man's approach, we know this is not about widening the tax net. It is just about getting money. They might end up actually impacting the telcos because Momo usage may go low, and it will impact telco profit itself and end up reducing even their takes from there. So look, we need to take a better look at our tax system. The problem is that the same elites who are in charge of the tax structures and tax systems and whatever are connected to these mines and these companies, etc. Okay, so it's difficult for them to do what they need to do to improve tax outcomes.
All right.
And then we keep visiting the same thing on the same poor people. Only 2.5 million people are paying income tax. And I have made a point in different forums that we need to take a hard look at that. I don't have a problem if we scrap all of income tax and increase VAT to 25%, because we are paying 20% VAT anyway. We need to do some hard modeling in taxation instead of doing these easy, cheap things which cannot last more than 2 years.
The finance minister says that, we need to get this done. If we don't, the country is in trouble. Let me read you his specific quote. He says, if we don't do this E-levy, we are just pushing ourselves in a way that would potentially end up in such a disaster. There was a warning of that because last week was a very difficult week for the country. Last week, we got downgraded by Fitch because they do not believe we could raise the revenues that we had forecasted because we were fighting about E-levy. So we need to moderate that because the consequences are quick.
Samson, this is the first time I remember that a government is allowing its ministers to go out and claim that they have failed. Okay? It boggles my mind that the persons in charge of our economy admitting that they failed after 5 years of managing the economy and saying that the failure is so catastrophic that if we do not give them more money, total crash. I can't understand how that logic works. In the first place, if you have failed after record borrowing and the incomes you've made from resources and other things after 5 years, and you come and ask me for the same people to give you more money after you have failed, especially when the sources of that money will cause further havoc in other places, I can tell you without a shadow of doubt that this will have a terrible effect on the digital economy that is coming up.
Is it also your position? Is it also your position that the E-levy should be abandoned completely?
It should be abandoned completely, and we should understand some things. Not every problem lends itself to a quick resolution. If you've created this over 5 years, let us bite the bullet. And let me tell you how we can deal with this problem.
Just 1 minute.
You can immediately cut government expenditure. Hold on, Samson, give me 1 minute. If we are looking for money to tide us over the next year or 2 years, there are a number of things we can talk about right now. You have 110 ministers. You can cut it to 50. Nothing will change in this country. Who is funding the National Cathedral? And what is it adding to us? You absolutely can stop expensive presidential travel. You can stop driving 30 cars, 30 D8s to one function. There are many things that can be stopped. And look, we are not saying these things as just populist, rhetoric. If you want people to join you in any form of sacrifice, you must show an example.
Thank you.
You must show that you're prepared to make the same sacrifices.
Thank you very much, Kofi Bento, Vice President Imani Africa. He's also a lawyer. Thank you for joining us.
A government that promised that we are moving the economy, or we will be moving the economy from taxation to production. It is a mark of dishonest leadership. It is a mark of incompetence to now turn around and say, pay more taxes.
Thank you.
You promised that we will move the economy from taxation to production.
Stephen,
you have no moral right.
The question people ask also is this, that the basic principle of taxation is that you tax earnings.
I want to address what you say. I can't use the 1 minute to address this.
I find that this question, anytime it's posed, nobody answers it.
Exactly.
E-levy, how do you determine that this is earning that you have to tax? And if we didn't get to this opposition, would you say that you are consulting people?
Before address you, there are issues to be addressed, and I want to go to it.
Well, when your time is up.
Fine.
Yeah.
I think the gentleman that spoke, Mr. Bento, respectfully, should analyze issues integrating the time in which we are, the causes of why probably our debt to GDP is up, rather than do one-sided discussion. It's very unfair and it's not right. We can have time to debate that too. Samson, I still maintain that even if the figure my brother is saying here, you do percentage increase between 2016 and now, it is about 185.95%. 4 years before, they increased our debt portfolio over 240. Go and check the figures. Ours is partly and greatly and remarkably as a result of the fact that our markets were uncontrollably sluggish and down and affected our revenue generations, especially 2019 ending and in 2020. So government had to choose other debt financing and the economy was not growing. So this thing, you cannot blame the government 100%. Then this suggestion that we should use extractive sector. Yes, but it's not reliable because natural resources deplete. Anything can happen. But I'm not saying it's not good. Where I agree with Mr. Bento is cutting down costs in some areas that do not have positive correlation to or with our GDP growth. For instance, maybe cars used by government. And such comments are accepted 100%. And it is a national issue. You cannot say MPP when this is doing worse. But I agree that we should look at maybe some of the expenditures we do in our country, especially number of land cruisers we use, expenditures on them and other areas. But let me tell you, for now, the best way to go to solve the short-term need is to adopt this and pass the E-levy and then we design a comprehensive and a strategic framework to solving going forward. You can only say that if your child has convulsion, you say, oh no, let the child go through prevention.
So the economy has convulsion.
Can I finish?
The economy has convulsion.
No, and lastly, if a government presents the true nature of what is happening, it doesn't mean it's admitting his failure.
All right.
Let us then compare the economy we took over to today.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bente should come and tag
my guests have been Godwin Edukujo Tameklo, Member Legal and Communications of the NDC, and Dr. Stephen Amwa, MP in Shire. So Kofi Bento joined us by Zoom. And my outfit, as always, is brought by Habels Couture. You find them at Ajiringano Gate, East Legon, and the contact is 0200 84 1988. Thank you very much. I'm Samson Ladia Yenini. We'll come your way again next week, God willing, with another edition of your most authoritative news analysis show, Newsfile.